Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Fall Game and Fish Advisory Board. Like many other meetings, we have to hold this virtually, and I know the advisory board meetings and Game and Fish people would really just as prefer to have these as an in-person meeting because we just get so much more out of it. But given the times that we're in, I don't think we have a choice. We are going to have two meetings, one tonight, one tomorrow night. Tonight, we are going to really focus on the Western Advisory Board districts, and those are District 7. I'm going a little bit out of order here, but District 7, Dave Naring, he's first because he does chair the advisory board. District 2 is Travis Lear. District 1 is Bo Wisness, and District 8 is Rob Brooks. So those names and their contacts are actually on the boards and commission portion of the state website. So if you have any comments or questions you have for those people, you can contact them, and we certainly encourage you to contact us too. We do have an agenda we're going to follow tonight, but we are going to get to questions also, and anything you might have. If you have anything, send them in at the chat. We'll get to them if we can. I'm going to go over the electronic posting update, an very brief outdoor heritage fund update, and then I'm going to turn it over to Scott Peterson, Deputy Director, talk about administrative rule changes, and then it's going to go to Greg Power, our Fisheries Division Chief, to delve a little bit further into the fishing tournament administrative rule change, the wheres and whys. And then I'm going to turn it over to Greg Link, who's going to talk about hunter education certification, how we're going to approach that in the future. And then Jeb Williams, our Wildlife Division Chief, is going to talk about CWD again. We've done that the last number of meetings. And then gender ID on big game carcasses. I know that's come up in the past. And then Brian Hosek, one of our administrative people, is going to talk about vendor bow tags and credit card fee assessment proposals. So we did ask for questions prior to the meeting, actually a few weeks ago. And we thank you for all the questions that you and the comments that you did send in. We'll get to as many as we can during the meeting, but believe me, we received a bundle of them. Some of them the same, some of them similar, but not the same. We'll get to those as quickly as we can. We're going to focus on the Western District type questions tonight. And if we don't get to them tonight or tomorrow night, we will answer all of them directly. Please be a little bit patient with us because we have a lot of questions out there. Some of them are multiple questions within a particular email. So we will get to them. It just might take us a little bit of time. So don't expect it within a couple of days, I would say. I just want to make a few comments before we get into the formal presentations. You've heard the word unprecedented time and time again during this COVID-19 situation that we've really been going through since March. And it really is unprecedented, at least for the last 102 years since the Spanish flu in 2018. Even though a lot of states around us basically shut down, North Dakota and particularly the Game and Fish, we stayed open. Now, you didn't necessarily get to come into the building here because we had some restrictions we had to abide by, but a lot of activities were done that needed to keep that resource going, not just for this year, but into the future. And I'm just going to give some examples of that. Our Fisheries Division, they took the necessary precautions and put a lot of work in to still collect egg spawn and northern pike and walleye. They trapped and transported, meaning trapped one lake where yellow perch might have been really plentiful and put them into another lake where we tried to get a fishery going, 200,000 of those. Courtesy docks put out there, a lot of signs, stocked fish all over the place, did ANS inspections. So they did an awful lot of things out there, again, with the necessary precautions that we needed to take to be out there. And we certainly encourage people to get out, not just the spring, but the summer and the fall, because there's good social distancing. But some of the other things, Wildlife Division continued to sign up plots. We now have over 800,000 acres, which is up from 791 in 2019. And that was a real challenge because we have to meet, or those biologists have to meet with the private landowners to actually get those contracts worked up and signed and everything. So that was a real challenge, but they got that done too. Put in a whole bunch of food plots, 2,500 acres of food plots, planted 2,000 acres of new grass. conducted the spring mule deer surveys, roadside surveys for upland game, and that list goes on and on and on. Stuff that people might take for granted, but a lot of states around us didn't do any of that. One of the more important things, we are in the Central Flyway for waterfowl. It's 11 states in the Central Flyway. North Dakota was the only state that did the spring waterfowl survey, which we've done for, gosh, I think it's around 70 plus years now. We were the only state that did that. So we're pretty proud of that. And of course, the hunter education online to get people to, the people that needed hunter education to get that certification. And again, Greg Link is going to talk about that a little bit later. And Greg is our Chief of Conservation and Communication. And again, that's only a sampling of everything that we did. And we typically do during an open water season, or the nice season, if you want to call it that. And it's what your Game and Fish does, so you can continue to have those opportunities into the future. I'm going to move into the electronic posting now. A lot of you listening may know that this has really been a contentious issue in the legislative session for a number of years. And during this last legislative session, some groups came together, and I have to give Senator Bob Erbely a lot of credit. Listens very well, very honest, very, very truthful man out there. And he led the charge on this. And so it went to the Interim Natural Resource Committee with the following charge. And excuse me, I put on my glasses now, but to study access to public and private lands for hunting, trapping, fishing, and related issues, including trespass violations and penalties, and provide recommendations regarding a land access database and the capability of electronic posting. At the direction of legislative management, the Information Technology Department and Game and Fish shall establish an electronic posting and hunter access information in up to 3 counties. And what the committee chose for the 3 counties were Slope, Ramsey, and Richland. They wanted to have it spread throughout the state. I know there were some other counties that were interested in being part of that pilot study, but they just weren't chosen. And again, the committee chose those. But in those counties, the landowners were able to electronically post their lands, but given there wasn't a penalty for trespassing on electronically posted land, they still had to physically post their land for a hunting trespass as they have in the past. Again, COVID-19 created some other issues. Again, when that came along in mid-March, ITD was really, or the Information Technology Department was really pulled away on a lot of different things. And so Brian Hosick, and I'll give him all the credit, he worked with some ITD folks to expedite the development of the application. And we offered as a Game and Fish Department on our online licensing platform, which I'm guessing many of you has used, for the development of that. And that was made available to landowners at the end of April. We gave them until July 15th to sign up so we could get it in the plots guide. 79 landowners and about 38,000 acres actually signed up for it. And these landowners are currently being surveyed to find out what's your comments on the ease and usability of the application. And some very anecdotal information is it was very easy to use. I've heard one comment that it took me longer to find my stapler to put up the signs than it did to electronically post my land. So I guess that to me is a positive. The electronically posted land was also shown in our plots book and on our electronic plots, in the plots page on our website. It was orange kind of cross-hatched, and we'll be surveying some hunters also. We haven't determined how to do that, to determine how did they use that information, how did they like the way it was. In terms of the Interim Natural Resource Committee and moving forward, they concluded their business on September 25th, and 3 bills will be presented in draft form to the upcoming 2021 legislative session. The first would extend the pilot study for 2 more years with no penalties, but would include all 53 counties in the state. The second bill would implement electronic posting for all counties and add the same penalties for hunting on electronically posted land as for the physically posted. And again, they still have the option, you can do either or, and it would still allow for physical posting. The third bill has actually 2 sections, one dealing with criminal trespass and one dealing with hunting trespass. On the criminal trespass portion, it would change the name requirement on a posting sign to may appear on the sign from must appear on the sign, meaning that you wouldn't have to sign it if you didn't want to. It's currently by law, you have to sign it if it's going to be valid. This one say you may. The bill adds that land enclosed by a fence is considered automatically posted land, but contains no definition of fence. And although I haven't seen this in writing yet, and I haven't seen any of these bills in final draft form, the word is that it would be automatically posted except for hunting and fishing. Again, don't take my word on it, wait till that bill comes out. But the hunting trespass portion has the same changes as criminal trespass for signature on the posting sign, meaning is changes must appear on the sign to may appear on the sign. And again, I just have to remind everybody, these are draft changes being recommended to the legislature and could change. So if you're interested, follow this closely. One really important thing, and I went through this very, very quickly, the North Dakota Wildlife Federation, and if you could put that up, Ashley. The North Dakota Wildlife Federation is sponsoring this coming Saturday, December 5th, from 1 to 3 to more fully discuss the process in the bill draft. So if you're interested, go to the website that's on the screen right now. And what you should do is once you get to that website, about a second or two after, you should get a pop-up screen that shows how to join the summit. And it's going to be a Zoom meeting. So I think there's going to be some great discussion, and certainly I do believe Senator Bob Erbely is going to be part of that discussion. So would certainly urge anybody that's interested in it to join that Zoom meeting. Second one, and again, I'm going to go very briefly on this, Outdoor Heritage Fund. That fund was started in 2013 by the legislature, and if you could pop up the PowerPoint, next slide. And it was meant to meet 4 directives. Next slide. First one was access to land. That also included projects that create habitat for fish and wildlife. Next slide. Agricultural stewardship, projects that improve, maintain, and restore water quality, soil conditions, plant diversity, animal systems, and to support other practices of stewardship to enhance farming and ranching. Next slide. Habitat restoration to develop, enhance, conserve, restore wildlife and fish and wildlife habitat on private and public lands. And the 4th directive is outdoor recreation, which conserve natural areas for recreation through the establishment and development of parks and other recreational areas. If you go to the next slide, Ashley. The vast majority of the applications have really been from large organizations that really have the wherewithal to do it. But also know the committee would like to see some grant applications from smaller entities. They don't have to be large projects. It can be a $5,000 or $10,000 project. The only thing is, like it shows on the slide here on the screen, you have to come up with 25% match. We have a lot of fish and wildlife clubs, and I don't see we as a game and fish department, but there are an awful lot of fish and wildlife clubs across the state that could apply. The difference, or probably the bottleneck, is that they have to be a nonprofit organization or a state entity or a tribal entity. What we're encouraging people to do at this point in time is actually go through their local park district, their county park district, their water resource board, work with them, because they can actually sponsor that project, and you could actually be part of that project. And again, it doesn't have to be big, but we certainly encourage these smaller ones. We'd like to get out there. A lot of good projects were funded this last time, a lot of great conservation projects. Over $11 million was allocated. And what you see, I think it's on this slide, I can't see it well, it's 2.4 million still available. And I believe it's March 1st, right around March 1st of 2021 is the deadline for the last one. So if you go to the last slide on this, Ashley. If you have any questions or comments on it, please don't hesitate to contact me at the Game and Fish Department. You can send it to our info account and it'll get to me. You can contact Bob Kylan. He is actually the chair of the Outdoor Heritage Committee. Bob's a great guy. And Andrea Fenig with the Industrial Commission, she does a great job of getting it. So if you have any questions on whether you qualify, how you go about it, go to the website or contact either one of them, and they'll certainly give you some great answers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Peterson on the administrative rules process.
Thank you, Terry. As Terry mentioned, my name is Scott Peterson. I'm Deputy Director here at Game and Fish. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to give you all a quick overview of the administrative rules process for how we change any of our administrative rules. Agency administrative rules are essentially a codification of all the rules for state administrative agencies, including the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Our administrative rules are defined in Title 30 of the North Dakota Administrative Code. The department updates and/or changes recent rule changes periodically for several different reasons. Some of those reasons may include bringing them into compliance with new legislation, eliminating unnecessary language, responding to public comments, or for enabling improvements in resource management, just to name a few. Greg Power, our fisheries chief, is going to address one of the recent changes in greater detail, and more specifically the change in fishing tournament rules. So essentially, he'll be addressing the why of that particular change, and obviously every administrative rule change has a different why. I'd like to briefly outline the process for implementing all changes, because we believe it's also important for our customer base, those who are directly affected by these changes, to understand the how of the overall process. First, our proposed changes are published in every official county newspaper in the state, as well as a date for a public hearing. The hearing is held solely for the purpose of soliciting public input on the proposed changes. Input can be presented orally at the hearing or submitted electronically for a 2-week period after the hearing. All input is then consolidated, reviewed, and our official responses to those questions and comments are then compiled and sent to the Attorney General's office for review. The final step in the process is for the agency to appear before the Administrative Rules Committee of the North Dakota Legislature. Only after all of those steps are followed can rules become officially enacted. Excuse me. It's important to our agency that we be completely transparent when proposing administrative rule changes. For this latest round of administrative rule changes, I can tell you that more than 13,000 individuals who are signed up to receive text and/or email alerts from the department each received an alert notifying them of the upcoming proposed changes on May 20th and again on June 8th. We also highlighted these proposed changes in a news release on May 20th and again on June 8th. Our news releases are printed in every daily and county newspaper in the state and are sent to each radio and television station for distribution. In total, 145 media outlets receive our news releases. We posted these proposed changes on our Facebook page on May 20th and again on June 8th, and we also displayed them on our website homepage continually from May 20th through June 28th as well. While the process may seem somewhat tedious, we believe the process is important and allows for ample opportunity for public input. As an example, one of the proposed changes in this latest round would have changed the rules for how we permit dog training on our wildlife management areas. But because we received numerous questions and comments regarding those proposed changes, we removed those proposed changes from further consideration until we can meet with the interested parties and further discuss options for solving the issue. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Power, our fisheries chief, to give a more in-depth presentation on the recent change to fishing tournaments. Greg.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. I am going to, as Scott mentioned, I'm going to discuss a little more detail on fishing tournaments, but first I thought it'd be a good time to reiterate some slides I finished last year with on last spring's advisory board meeting, and that includes pictures of kids with smiles on their face, and I think that's critical. It's always good to see kids smiling, especially when it comes to fishing, and the purpose of reusing these slides is just to reiterate the obvious, and in the words of a famous songwriter and weatherman, well, 50 years ago, Johnny Nash, it's going to be a bright, sunshiny day when it comes to fishing here. Tomorrow, the next day, and perhaps the next 365 days. We have a lot to look forward to. Just a quick update on fishing in general. Terry touched on this a little bit. We are very fortunate a year ago, or the fall of 2019, to have a whole lot of rain in the landscape that raised the lake levels, especially the prairie lakes. Oh man, we came up 5+ feet in many cases. And we got through winter, this past winter, in great shape for winter kills. So we kind of reset the fishery resource in North Dakota. And moving forward, short term, this ice fishing season should be a good one, but probably more important, looking longer term in the next couple of years, it's nothing but a bright, sunshiny day to look forward to. So I think that's some really good news. In terms of our fisheries staff, and Terry again mentioned this before, got a lot done as usual in this last year despite COVID. We did do our normal spring stuff. We filled the battery jars with both pike and walleye eggs. This fall with salmon eggs. We got everything we needed, could have asked for. Very fortunate. We were able to stock our lakes with near record amount of production of primarily fingerling, but also larger fish too. We were able to do our development program, our boat ramps. I believe 3 or 4 new waters got new boat ramps, brand new ramps across the state. We put in about 12 brand new fishing docks across the state. Worked on a number of fish cleaning stations, still working on them. And by the way, we are in the process of retrofitting in time about every fish cleaning station out there with a bigger, better grinder system. So that's good news. It'll take a couple years to get caught up with all that, and roads and the normal stuff. We got a lot done in development. Our fish management research guys, the ones that are out there doing the test netting and research, more of the usual record number of lakes sampled again, and fish populations, although they're young, that's the good news. They are young. That means there's good things to look forward to. So promising results. Maybe the last thing to touch on before tournaments is ANS, something we touch upon every year, at least for the last 10 or 15 years, but it's important to note aquatic nuisance species, ANS. It was kind of a 2020 was bad news, good news. The bad news being that we did find the poster child of ANS, that being zebra mussel. We found them in a new water body at Lake Lemoore by the city of Lemoore. So that's the bad news. I guess the good news is that was the only place, and we looked hard. Our ANS crews really put in a lot of time. We looked hard, did not find any new ANS infestations anywhere in North Dakota. The reason I say that's the good news is because we're surrounded by states and provinces that continue to find lots of nasties in our water, and we're very fortunate. And maybe a lot of that credit goes to you folks for being compliant with the regulations that are in place. Our ANS regulations are really simple and straightforward. We're not asking much, so we can, other than please be 100% compliant. We can really reduce the threat of moving ANS. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit on fishing tournaments here. First off, when we talk about tournaments, you need to understand the department's perspective and constituency groups. We license roughly 150,000 residents buy a fishing license annually, and then there's another 60,000 non-residents that come to North Dakota, buy a license and fish in North Dakota waters. The vast majority, so we're running somewhere between 200 and 220,000 licensed anglers annually. The vast majority of those people are not tournament anglers. When it comes to tournament issues, the opposing views from both sides can be very extreme. The department has always managed to the middle, trying to find some common ground. And fortunately, and I should stress this, very fortunately, most of our anglers, whether tournament or non-tournament, are very reasonable. In terms of dollars and cents, fishing is actually a pretty big business. The gross business volume of fishing in North Dakota generates about $1.7 billion a year. However, the department has never managed a resource for individual economic return. The department views all licensed anglers the same, regardless if they fish in a $100,000 boat or fish from shore with a bamboo pole. Over the years and decades, it's actually been decades, 3 or 4 decades, administrative rules and tournament protocol that the department utilizes has greatly reduced the conflict between both tournament and non-tournament anglers. Here's just a little more background too on tournaments in general in the state of North Dakota. The permitted tournaments, as you can see on this graph, over the last roughly 25 years, we've about doubled. We've seen a definite trend uptick of fishing tournaments. However, in the last couple of years, we've kind of plateaued off. We're in that neighborhood. About 160 tournaments in the state are permitted every year. In terms of where people fish, it's runs true every year. Roughly half, or almost exactly half of all fishing tournaments in North Dakota occur in what we call the Big Three, and that is Secaucus, Hawaii, the Missouri River, and or Devil's Lake. So let's say we're running roughly 80 tournaments in the big waters, and it's without a doubt, if there ever are issues between tournaments or other tournaments, I mean, the issue isn't always just tournament, non-tournament, it is often between tournaments. The issues are going to be on the Big Three. Next. Scott touched on this, it is the law. We got it. When it comes to fishing tournaments, there's been something in statute since the early 1980s. And in our century code, we have a law, and with that, we have administrative rules, and we have, I think, 6, 7 different administrative rules when it comes to regulating fishing tournaments. So why we're here talking about this tonight, one common theme we got basically the very same email from a whole lot of people out there, from Iowa to Florida, from West Fargo to Devil's Lake. Multiple tournament anglers have asked the following question: why was the recent change made to remove the $5,000 cap from the tournament fee? And I'm going to go into a little explanation on that, and that gets to what Scott started out with, the how, and I'm going to touch on the why. First off, we got to kind of frame the issue. What is the issue? Since 1984, all North Dakota fishing tournaments must pay a minimum of 10% of the entry fees towards a conservation project. This is nothing new. This has been in place now for 35 plus years. However, for the past 20 years, there was a requirement that was capped that a maximum of $5,000 would be paid out by a tournament. The new change that was effective October 1st of this year was that cap was removed, which means moving forward that all tournaments now need to pay the full 10%. And that, I should also mention, the 10% by rule is a minimum of 10% towards a fishery conservation project. You may ask, and it's a fair question, what is a fishery conservation project? It's a whole host of things, but the intention of it is to reinvest some of that tournament monies back into the local resource. And this may include anything that deals with fishing opportunities, from upgrading boat ramps, boat docks. Those are the common ones: boat ramps and boat docks, sometimes fish cleaning stations, parking lots, and also once in a while educating the public is also an eligible expense. How does the department determine where the money goes? This is a question that was asked by quite a few people. Well, what we do with it is a very popular designation. We take that tournament money from a tournament. The sponsor determines where they want to spend that money. I'd say 9 out of 10 times, if they say somewhere, it's going to be somewhere right local where that tournament was. And we're all for that. So we reallocate that money back to the managing entity. Typically, they're park boards, sometimes they're water boards, cities, counties. It could be all over the board. But we try to keep that money right back to where that tournament is held for boating access. On the right side of this table too, you can also see we give an appreciation award out annually, and we give it to different entities that demonstrate leadership and a commitment providing and expanding fishing and boating related areas and facilities. And if you look here, last 10 years, we are all over the board from big to small, but we have all kinds of groups, from water boards to park boards to wildlife clubs. There's a whole lot of partners out there. We work with roughly 835 individuals, landowners, clubs, park boards, water resource districts, associations. So there's a whole lot of people. This isn't specific to tournaments, but this is trying to get good boating access to our fishing lakes. This next table here is just an example of where that money was spent in 2020 as of a month or so ago. The money that came from tournaments went back, again, locally, and it's kind of hard to see perhaps on this table, but they go back into fish cleaning stations, in some cases winter access, boat docks, ADA boat docks, all kinds of good projects I think virtually everybody out there would agree upon. So the question then was, why was this $5,000 fishery conservation project cap removed? And the reason this really isn't a technical issue, because the issue is simply an issue of balance and fairness. Question that often has been asked in the past, excuse me, by various people, but the question was, why did there appear to be preferential treatment for large tournaments with large payouts? In order to be fair, moving forward, all tournaments are now responsible for paying the full 10%. And graphically, I tried to show this here on this figure, but if you look on the bottom, the green arrow, that represents, if we grouped all the fishing tournaments that paid something into the conservation money in 2018 and 19, a total about 280 tournaments. 95% of all those paid the full 10% towards the conservation fee. Nothing changes. They are below that $5,000 cap. Any change now, that doesn't affect at all 95% of all tournaments. The only ones that are affected are literally a handful or two. Approximately 5% of the tournaments did not pay that 10% because they did not have to. That, I mean, it was perfectly fine at the time. But the $5,000 cap now is removed, so moving forward, they would too have to pay that full 10%. Next. Another way of looking at that in this table, if you compare it, just pick either year. Let's say 2018, the top example there is 155. Remember I said there's roughly 160 tournaments. 155 of them have less than $50,000 in entry fees. All collectively, all 155 tournaments paid in to the entry fees about $640,000 in 2018, and they paid 10%. Or $64,000 towards the conservation project. On the bottom is all the tournaments with greater than $50,000 in entry fees. That totaled in 2018, 5 tournaments. They paid in, interestingly, their entry fees were almost identical to the 155 small tournaments. So they paid in an entry fee of $634,000, but they only paid $25,000 towards conservation fee, which was 4%. Next. So a question, we did have a number of questions when it comes to tournaments. One, and we hear this isn't unique. We've heard this oftentimes on a number of subjects, but what will be gained by the Game and Fish Department and their greed in enacting this rule? Well, first off, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of sub-questions here, but it should be known that no tournament conservation monies are used by the department for administrative or any other expenses. 100%, every penny of the conservation monies go back to the local entities to improve the fishery resource. So there's no greed on the behalf of the Game and Fish. It goes right back to the resource. Excuse me. Another question that was asked, and this one was asked by a number of people, this change will effectively stop all tournaments, large and small, in the state of North Dakota. Unfortunately, this is perhaps some of the misinformation that's been going on out there. That is totally not true. We've already approved 65 tournaments this year, or for next year, 2021. We've already approved 65 of them. And again, if you go back to that one graph, of the 160 permitted tournaments, more than 150 of them will experience absolutely no change. It's only 5 to 7 tournaments will now have to pay the full 10%. And it's important to also know that for most of these, the increase will be minimal. In some cases, only a couple $100. In some cases, maybe a few $1,000s. And lastly, another important subject or point to bring out is that of these 5 to 7 tournaments, some of them have a number of them have paid more than the 5%, including one that's paid 10%, the full 10%. So again, this really is not impacting most tournaments in the state at all. All right, kind of winding down here. Another question to try to answer here. This change may prevent large out-of-state tournaments with entry fees of $200,000-$300,000 or more from coming to North Dakota, as they cannot afford to pay conservation fees of $20,000 or $30,000 or more. But it needs to be well established out there. Preventing large out-of-state tournaments from coming to North Dakota was never the purpose of eliminating the cap. It is acknowledged that attracting large, high-profile tournament sponsors who have high entry fees and very large payouts are sought by some local economic development entities as a means to bring in outside money into a small community. The local benefit for a community needs to be balanced with the need to treat all tournaments the same. At this point, assessing the same percentage toward a fishery conservation project with no exceptions appears to be the fair and balanced approach. Next. This information has been out there for maybe perhaps not in that detail, but there is a lot of good questions. If you go into the Game and Fish website and go to the fishing tab, there's a section there with frequently asked questions and answers. A number of those, and there's a whole host of different issues out there, but one of them right near the top is on tournaments and these changes. So there's a lot more detail there. I urge anybody that wants some facts dealing with this issue to go there. You can find that information. Okay, On the bright side, and I think this is critically important for everybody to understand, a combination of two things. One is that we apply this internally, we apply some tournament protocol, excuse me, when establishing or allowing permitting tournaments, but also the fact that all tournament anglers contribute 10% of their entry fees towards a fishery conservation project has improved the acceptance of tournaments with the general fishing public over the past 30 years. Yes, there still are issues between the two groups perhaps, but without a doubt, we've come a long, long ways of finding that balance, and things have really turned out. I'd say most people are on board and understand the rationale, and we've really, the number of complaints, although still probably too many, are far less than they were 10, 20 years ago. So I think we've tried to find that balance, and we're near there, although it's always moving. So with that, that's that for fishing tournaments for now. Please continue to address the department, provide us information or any input you may have. And next up is Greg Link, who will talk on hunter education. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. As Mr. Powers mentioned, my name is Greg Link. I'm the Chief of Conservation and Communication. I'm glad to join you tonight to give you an update on our hunter education situation and how we're going to approach it next year. If you recall, last year we were in the midst of kind of the March pandemic when things were first starting to hit, when we were at a crucial time of administering our hunter ed program. And so we had to really gear up and make some changes on the go. And so I'm going to kind of give you a rundown of how things went, and then kind of how we are planning to approach 2021 as best we can. So most of you know and understand North Dakota state law requires anybody born after 1961 and 12 years of age or older needs to complete and pass hunter education course in order to obtain a hunting license in our state. However, North Dakota also provides a provision known as the apprentice license, kind of call it the try it and you may like it provision. It provides an opportunity for a prospective hunter to be issued a one-time, one-year apprentice hunter license. With this apprentice license, an individual may hunt small game and deer if accompanied by an adult at least 18 years of age and licensed to hunt in North Dakota. Here's a glimpse at our hunter education certification back in regular times. Our hunter education courses were traditionally taught, were traditionally taught by 700 plus dedicated volunteer instructors, and I kind of want to shout out to those folks who've been doing that for many years and helping us out. That's been the key on what our program relies on. Those traditional classroom courses, there were a minimum of 14 hours in-person classroom, one-on-one, or not one-on-one, but in person. Students needed to be 11 years of age by the end of the calendar year. And that was 95% of our certifications were done in this way. And it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of, dedication by the students and by the instructors to show up and be there. But we also offered a home study course, and that originated, it was for our older folks. We started it as a 16-year and older, and then transitioned down to 13 years of age. But what happened there is the first night of the course, the student had to show up and meet with the instructors to kind of get a review of some of the material and some of the carries of the guns. And then once they had been given that orientation, they were allowed to go then do an online home study curriculum course. Then afterwards, the student again would come back in person and have a written test and the firearm handling practical by our instructor. So those were kind of our traditional approaches, and the department average is nearly 4,000 to 5,000 hunter ed students a year with certifications. And those are a lot of times being completed in those communities all across North Dakota by instructors, close to where those students live. The bulk of this classroom coursework occurred from January to May, prior to the DEER application deadline. There was always kind of that rush and demand to get that certification done prior to the application. And sometimes that led to some difficulties to get into class because of the student, their conflicting schedules, as most young students at that age have a lot going on, but then there's also limited classes in certain areas. Last year, in amongst this then, when COVID-19, the limited gathering restrictions hit in mid-March, we had only certified about 1,000 students prior to that. And so we were kind of really in the thick of things. This meant that we had, even with some new hunters using the apprentice license provision, we estimated we were still needed to certify probably over 3,000 students before the DEER application deadline in June and on the onset of the hunting seasons in September. Initially we really stressed that, there's going to be a bottleneck here. Let's take care of the students that really needed it. And so those students that weren't going to be turning 12 years of age in 2020, we just said maybe you'd put it off. That's not required of you. And then also, if you could take an apprentice course or a apprentice license, use the apprentice license provision in 2020, that would get us kind of remove some of the bottleneck for us. But we still had a long ways to go and a lot of students to get through. And so what we decided to do to address this in a safe manner, to deal with and comply with the gathering restrictions, we quickly moved to a two-phase COVID contingency certification. So for the rest of those students, we provided a temporary hunter ed certification that was online by viewing some supplemental videos and then taking that home study online course. They were able to achieve a temporary hunting education certification, and they got their number that they needed to apply for a deer license in June. But we also told them this is a two-phase approach. You're going to have to come back later, when at that time we were hoping, maybe the pandemic thing would have settled down a little bit, but we were going to require a full certification in-person test with our staff or one of our instructors. And that needed to be handled before the end of 2020. So what happened? Here's the results. Approximately 1,800 students completed that online portion and acquired or achieved that temporary certification. The North Dakota staff conducted about 80 follow-up testing sessions then later in the summer to bring those kids and students to full certification. Approximately 1,200 students have then completed that full testing requirement. So what concerns us a little bit, there's still 600 students out there that got that temporary certification but have not yet completed their testing to gain full certification. So we truly want to let folks know that if you have intentions of achieving full certifications, you're going to need to do that before the end of the year. And we're offering a last chance round of testing offered in December in our major urban areas. So be looking out for that in those areas. If you do not get that taken care of, you'll have to basically start over in 2020, start from scratch. So we did test and we will be testing using the pandemic protocol. This summer we didn't probably use masks at the time, but we definitely had that spacing taken care of to address that social distancing. We used large venues where we could really space both students and instructors out, and we used sanitized between all the tables, all the training firearms and other training aids, and that's the approach we'll be taking on until this thing wraps up. So our approach for 2021, I'll quickly give you an approach on how we're going to do that. We will still allow volunteer instructors to teach our traditional classroom course if they choose, if they feel comfortable, if they feel it's safe, if and when the pandemic requirements allowed, using those pandemic restrictions. That being said, we expect that this will occur very infrequently. A lot of our instructors are probably in that my age class in that risk zone, and so they're going to be playing it safe too. And so what we're going to be we're just telling folks, don't rely on this approach. We're going to be the department's going to be offering and utilizing a tuned up online home study course as our primary means for hunter education certification in 2021. And we're probably expecting higher demand, even because, again, some people put it off last year. They used the apprentice license, or they were still 11 years old. So we're going to have to put a lot of students through, and we think that that's the most effective, efficient, safe way to do it. With the help then from our volunteers, the department staff will do the follow-up testing and practicals in our main urban areas. We hope to be able then, by using this approach, that most students will only have to have about an hour's drive to do that follow-up testing, which will be predetermined when you sign up for a course. You're going to know when your test night is, and so that'll be the plan. So that's, as we look at things going forward, that's how we're going to approach it, knowing we also have to be adaptive. That's kind of what 2020 taught us. So off we go. Thanks. Our next presenter will be Jeb Williams. He's our Chief of Wildlife.
Thank you, Greg. Well, greetings from the Wildlife Division. As Terry mentioned earlier, this is hard. Having advisory board meetings in this format, especially this time of year for the Wildlife Division, we rely a lot and appreciate the feedback we get at the fall district advisory board meetings. And so this is quite a bit different. This does provide at least a good avenue for us to provide information. It's just not quite as flowing, I guess, as they are at the district meetings where we can have good conversations. But nonetheless, like Terry mentioned, we did receive a lot of good questions from people coming in and good feedback. So obviously everybody understands the situation out there and doing what we can. Like I said, this is a big opportunity for us to talk about deer, and we know that in North Dakota, people like and appreciate deer hunting just about as much as anything. We did have some increased opportunities this fall, just over 69,000 total licenses, which was an increase of about 3,500 from 2019. So the good news is we're continuing to trend up, and I think that is going to continue if we don't get absolutely slammed by some winter weather coming, this winter or next winter. We've really been conservative with licenses and seeing some nice growth out there on the landscape. One of the things I mentioned earlier is, again, talking about the feedback that is so important to us across the state this time of year. And one of the things that I do have this year to report, which is very good, and I think it's something that we're going to be looking at as a tool as we continue forward. But the last number of years, we've been doing a lot of experimenting and even into the form of a research project with surveys, with hunter harvest questionnaires, and doing those electronically. One of the things that provides the department with much more immediate feedback on how seasons went. And so I do have a little bit of an update on that for our deer gun season already. Right when deer gun season closed, Chad Parent, our survey coordinator, sent out for the individuals that provided email address to us when they applied, sent those questionnaires out to those individual. And as it stands right now, we're looking at just shy of a 69% success rate as far as deer harvest in North Dakota. So we'll see where that ends up. Obviously, that's it's a good sample size that we have already. We had really good response rate from people sending that back in right away. What we're going to do now is for the individuals that did not do that, we are going to send out a reminder. And then if we still don't hear from them, we will send a paper copy in the mail eventually as well. So, but some really good information to be able to have for us right away versus having to wait a couple months before all that information is tabulated and all the data collected. So some really good information there that we're pleased with. One of the things I'm going to do, and we're talking about deer, I guess, a little bit right now before I move into talking about a quick CWD update, is did have some questions again that came in from the western part of the state that I want to make sure to address. Everybody's familiar this year with, we did have an EHD outbreak and several of our deer gun units across the western and south central, southwest part of the state. One of the questions here was whitetail population in 4C and 3D1 appears decimated, and hoping that we will cut back on licenses moving forward. That is definitely good to hear and good to know. We'll obviously closely monitor the results we have from our hunter harvest questionnaire and from other survey results we're doing. We know that EHD, and this year was no different. We had areas where there was some pretty localized loss associated with whitetail deer, and then other areas that are 4 or 5 miles away, no problems at all. So, and then this maybe talks about one of the other questions we got here comes from 4A about mule deer and whitetail populations doing very well and probably going to need to increase licenses for both next year. So, I mean, that's good to hear. We know that mule deer in 4A had been one of the units where we had gone the longest without bringing back antlerless mule deer tags in that area after we'd completely eliminated those licenses in 4A anyway for 6 years. And so, but we have been issuing mule deer doe licenses in 4A. And so it sounds like this individual seeing both good numbers of mule deer and whitetail deer. Also received a comment here about just increasing the quality, potentially looking at a different option and for Badlands mule deer as far as a split season, maybe doing something 2/3 of the folks earlier, 1/3 of them later, taking a little pressure off the rut. And it's an interesting concept. It's a lot to chew on. Obviously, we've had discussions in the past with a lot of different people about it's not uncommon to hear about some input back from people wanting to take especially the mule deer season away from the rut. But it's definitely a concept out there that I guess it's always something for us to throw around out there, the pros and the cons. But and I guess a few more came in here on CWD. So what I'm going to do is move back into my presentation just about on our CWD update real quick, wanting to really appreciate and thank the people that provided samples this year for their harvested deer heads. Over 2,000 heads were tested in Western North Dakota this year and in 3F2. So again, we appreciate everybody that participated in that effort. We know it's a win-win. A lot of people want that comfort level as far as getting the test before they consume the deer meat, wanting to make sure it's healthy, does not have CWD. And we're also obviously needing and very appreciative of the information to help guide our CWD management as well. One of the things we do know so far, as far as some test results back, we have received word that we have 2 positives from 3F2. So in some ways that's good news. And again, not all of these our test results are back yet, but if there's going to be positives, we just assume they be in 3F2. That's our unit that has the most CWD positives and the longest history of CWD positives. So it's not a big surprise coming from that area, but nothing yet as of yet from the Western units. And something I just want to remind folks about too is we did implement, the department implemented something I think was very creative this year so people can go on their North Dakota Game and Fish profile and check their CWD testing results. If they submitted a deer head to one of our collection sites, they can go on and check those on their Game and Fish profile and see what those test results are. So we're getting pretty quick turnaround time with those test results. So that's also another a very nice benefit in place. A couple things that I do want to weave in here too. Again, appreciate the people taking the time to send us in these questions about these topics on hand. So I want to make sure to address as much as we can here tonight. Question from Justin. Where are we at with deer baiting restrictions in certain areas? Does game fish feel the bans are beneficial, looking to add more baiting units, possibility of lifting the bans? I guess real quick on that, I don't ever see the department going backwards in our baiting ban. CWD is permanent when it gets on the landscape, and I think just from an overall wildlife health standpoint, I would be very surprised if the department ever went backwards in our bait bans in those areas. I think that lots more discussion on moving forward with bait bans in other areas. So far, the department has handled baiting bans based on where we found the disease and the distance and neighboring units, those types of things. So it's a couple other follow-up questions here that we get is CWD seems to be spreading. Game farms and baiting are obvious spreaders of disease. Why isn't North Dakota preventing activities that will spread the disease? And we're doing the best we can. Obviously with the baiting issue, we know that brings up a lot of conversation, a lot of controversy, and it's been dealt with the legislature. We've been very upfront saying that we will implement baiting bans in disease risk situations, which obviously CWD is. And we try to work with the North Dakota Board of Animal Health as closely as we can on game farms as well. So those are some issues that we feel like we're doing our best. Sometimes we know that's not perfect, but I guess that's the way it is. Another comment on CWD, I believe there needs to be serious discussion about banning baiting statewide in light of CWD. I feel we should be more proactive, and many states have already done so. When would we be banning baiting statewide? And again, that's at this point in time, our focus has been on preventative as far as where the disease occurs. Now, I think that a fair question would be at what point in time would we by being proactive in some of these units, especially in the western part of the state where we do have a pretty checkerboard pattern of units, deer units where you can bait and deer units where you cannot bait. So lots of discussion. The department is currently in the process of putting together a CWD task force, which is going to help, from a department-wide effort and issues to look at a lot of these different things and help guide the department a little bit to make sure that we're doing the best things according to science. So I'm going to move on to the next one. This is actually the title of what my presentation was supposed to be about, but I wanted to give a little more of just an all-around wildlife division update on some important things. So one of the things when we talk about CWD, we know that it gets confusing for the public when we're talking about CWD units. People have always known this to be true. A deer carcass or boned out meat must be accompanied by the head to the final place of storage. People, when they know deer hunting and think about deer hunting, that's what they think of. And so even though we've had some CWD restrictions in place for close to, well, I guess 11 years now, there's still some confusion about the deer head in CWD units. So our intention here is a proposal that we want to discuss is to look at cleaning some language up in our deer proclamation along with our CWD proclamation so it's not confusing for the public. And then in addition to that is also allowing a little flexibility in non-CWD units as well as far as transportation of the deer head. So we're looking at a couple exceptions there, and obviously there is an exception right now. It's dropping the head off at a Game and Fish CWD collection site within the unit. We would prefer that people do that. We know that that's not always a perfect choice for them, but we would certainly prefer that they take that route and take that option when they, before they leave the unit or before they leave the area that they can with that head. The other option that we're looking at as far as providing a little additional flexibility, if somebody wanted to leave that deer head at a friend's house or a taxidermist's house in that unit, that area, they would need to tag as currently required and then take 2 pictures using a cell phone with date and time stamp turned on. one picture of the entire animal at the kill site with the tag attached, and a second picture of a close-up of the tag so that the tag information is readable. So that would allow for somebody to take their deer head in different areas. They would not have to bring it all the way home to their final residence if they took these steps. And then also the photographs of the entire animal at the kill site with a tag attached and close-up of the tag must be shown to a game warden or any other law enforcement upon request for accountability purposes. If you would choose to leave your deer head in the field, which again you can do right now, but this is something that we've got a lot of questions on, and I think they're fair. Is that people are saying, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable leaving my deer head in the field with the tag attached to it, and so this would allow to leave your deer head in the field after taking pictures and of course saving them, and then the ear or antler with the tag attached must be cut off and accompany the meat or carcass while in transport. So what we're looking at doing again here is providing a little clarity, cleaning up some language on CWD transport, while also providing a little flexibility for people in non-CWD units as well, as far as transportation of the deer head back to their final residence, which if you follow these steps, it would be something that you would no longer have to do. So this is in the proposal stage. We know there's some discussion to be had on that, but we'll provide update at the spring advisory board meetings. And if people have some additional comments about that, we'd love to hear them. I would think that it's going to be a popular thing. Again, we're just providing some additional options and flexibility to people that have been known, that have been using this system for a long time. Moving on here, one of the things that is on our plate that has been somewhat interrupted or at least slowed down by COVID is the department. We are in the process of setting the department 5-year deer goals. And the challenge with that is it's a very public process as far as meeting with district offices, our district staff we've done in the past, and then obviously meeting with the public to get their thoughts on deer goals. And so that's something that we're gonna start working on. I don't know for sure what it's going to look like in the spring, just depending on how everything is looking COVID-wise. It might be something we bump back 6 months or. But I guess the good thing is right now, just backing up on this slide here, you can see that in 2010 our deer goals were 125,000. We had some things happen obviously in between 2010 and 2015 where we had to set our deer goals quite a bit lower at 75,000. And looking at 2020, you can see the empty circle there. I don't know what that's going to be, but I think we can all probably agree that most people in the state continue to have a desire to have more deer on the landscape. And so we're going to be striving at a number certainly above 75,000 for the next 5 years. It's just going to be a matter of where that one might be. So stay tuned on that, please. Just to finish up here, one of the things, this obviously tonight is the western side of the state, and so it's kind of hard to not talk about bighorn sheep, but we also know that people really like talking about bighorn sheep in the east, so I'm going to talk about it again tomorrow night. But we have some really good things going on with bighorn sheep. We have some really good things going on with elk and moose as well, but as you all remember, in 2015, we had a bit of a scare with our bighorn sheep population with pneumonia issue that went through the herd, and fortunately we were on the lower end of mortality and have really bounced back nicely. And so it's been really fun to see, and the hard work that Brett Wiedemann puts in as far as managing the sheep. And just here's a ram from this year that was actually harvested. And so when the season was done this year, we ended up harvesting the largest bighorn sheep ever taken in North Dakota, the second largest, and the 5th largest. So it's pretty neat. Kudos goes out to Brett Wiedemann for his management. Bighorn sheep is unique for us in the big game world in the department, because we can actually manage for and we want to manage for mature animals and for trophy animals. That's in North Dakota with our smaller sheep population. We want to take out the biggest, most mature rams that are out there on the landscape. And so, for other species, that's not our goal, but for bighorn sheep it is. And so there's some tremendous rams out on the landscape and some really neat opportunities for people that are lucky enough to draw the license. So Having said that, appreciate everybody's time, and I guess I'll ask Greg if there's any questions that have came in for me while we're visiting here.
Yeah, Jeb, we got a few questions that came in for you. One specifically addresses Unit 3A1 and other non-mule deer specific management units. This gentleman would like to see the doe-only youth deer hunters be able to hunt mule deer does. He said himself and many others share the same point of view due to the high population of muley does.
So we've heard that from a couple different individuals, actually, the last couple years, and it does make sense. I've went through the last couple years with my girls as far as their youth licenses, and there's no doubt that, you know, sometimes a mule deer doe during the youth season probably be a little more advantageous, you know, for a first-time hunter versus a whitetail doe. So, and granted, numbers are up a little bit, but so I guess here's where we're at with that though. The 11, 12, 13-year-old whitetail doe youth license is set in legislature, so it would have to be changed to allow mule deer to be taken. And you know, if I heard right, I believe this individual was talking about non-mule deer management units, and so that would not be allowed under his question to be taken in those 8 units where we manage specifically for mule deer, and then the rest of the state they would be. So, you know, again, I think from a youth opportunity, that's definitely something to consider, but it also is something where we'd have to be at the legislature to get that approval and that change as well.
Okay, Jeb, then switching gears a little bit. The next question is, why does Game and Fish let ranchers graze and bale game and fish land?
So wildlife management areas, we have a variety of different management tools that we use to help manage that landscape, and we have a variety of grasslands, whether that be native, whether that be non-native, and so there's different methods and different uses to keep that landscape healthy, especially on our native areas where we have native range. And one of the things we've learned a lot over the years is by resting these areas, you really eliminate and decrease the diversity of the plant life in that area, which then of course you're going to decrease the wildlife availability in those areas too. So it's a fine line as far as that management and keeping the diversity on the landscape while also keeping it attractive for wildlife. And so we use burning, we use haying, we use grazing, we use a variety of different management tools in order to try to keep those areas as healthy, diversity-wise, as we possibly can, based on what that landscape looks like.
Okay, Jeb, and the last question for you. This gentleman said it's been nearly 9 years since a 2011 snowstorm that was devastating to wildlife, including pheasant. After many mild winters, the pheasant population is still not very good in the central part of the state. Is this primarily due to lack of habitat? Then he went on to say the downturn of CRP acres, all kinds of tree rows being taken out and sloughs being burned has got to be taking a toll. It doesn't seem like there's any good news coming to reverse these trends. Do you see any changes coming that will improve habitat loss?
Well, there's a lot there, I guess, in that question, but to be as short and as I can be on it is, yeah, I mean, habitat is the driver in North Dakota. There's no doubt about that, that if we have habitat on the landscape, we're going to have critters. And we know we're going to have some tougher winters at certain period of time. And will that still have its toll on critters? Yes, it will, but we have adequate, really strong habitat programs on the landscape. Those critters are going to bounce back a lot easier too. So we have seen a reduction in CRP. We know the last couple years, and we know there's going to be another CRP coming up, signing up. As Terry mentioned earlier, our PLATS program, our PLATS folks have been doing what they can with the budgets they have as far as enrolling different areas, new habitat, setting good goals on their landscapes in their district as far as putting new habitat on the ground and just continuing those partnerships the best we can with as many entities as we can to try to get that, try to get as much habitat on the ground as we can, because yeah, as the individual said, it is a habitat issue. And fortunately this year, I think most folks would agree that pheasant numbers have probably looked as good as they have for a number of years. And so that's certainly a good thing. But yeah, we're always looking for additional habitat opportunities, whether it be through the Outdoor Heritage Fund, partnering with other programs, whether it be through CRP, working with individual landowners on trying to get their land enrolled in some type of habitat program, whether it has our stamp on it or not. We're willing to help people get some habitat on the landscape. So our private lands biologists are a wealth of information and great contacts for people that might have an interest in getting more habitat on their particular land. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over now to Brian Hosick. Brian is in our administrative division. He's going to talk about some items related to archery sales and credit cards.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Hosick. I'm going to give you an update on the online licensing system in regards to vendors and credit card fees. To begin, I'm going to start with a little bit of history on our online licensing system. We developed the online licensing system in 2001. At that time, we still offered paper applications, and we were processing paper applications at that time. These online systems were when they were constructed, they were also made available to some of our vendors around the state. After the online licensing system, we then migrated to some of our lotteries, watercraft registrations, and hunter education. Over the years, we monitored the sales and trends of these systems, watching as more folks would adopt some of the self-service and online purchasing. As we observed more people using these online services, we began to transition some of our systems to exclusively online. This began in 2016 with our licensing system, and our lottery system followed in 2018. And this year we did move over our watercraft registration system here in 2020. This transition helped us make some significant improvements to the services we provided. Examples of this, and as we talked about in the past, were some of the lottery results, improving the time it took to run these lotteries. We wanted to simplify some of our licensure and really tailor that experience to the individuals that came in to buy or apply. We were able to present them with, if it was a youth coming in, we could present them with the youth licenses, non-residents, or even 65 and older. We can tailor those licenses to the individual. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, and I know this has been mentioned on every presentation tonight. And for us with online licensing here, this transition, all these steps we made in this transition really positioned us well, and it was tremendous help during the pandemic. We were in the midst of a 3-year watercraft registration cycle. We were going to register and renew over 60,000 watercraft, and with state offices open by appointment only, we were in a really good position to pull this off by transitioning the system here this last year. Navigating the challenges of COVID from, as mentioned earlier with the hunter education. Again, these decisions across the board allowed us to deliver these services without any disruption. Next slide, Ashley. There. We're continuing to seek enhancements in these systems. We're really looking for that user experience when they're using the online systems. We've made a lot of progress with our public-facing or self-service systems. And implement a lot of features on the online licensing system. What I mean by the self-service system is probably the one that most are familiar with, either purchasing on the computer or using your phone, smartphone or computer. We do have a separate system that is used by our internal staff. It's more behind the scenes, and as well as some of our licensed vendors as well. So our plan here is to take all the effort and work that we put into these self-service systems and extend these capabilities over to the systems that are used by our licensed vendors, as well as our district offices. We do have folks that still prefer not to use the self-service options. They can visit our district offices or visit some of the vendors, and so that is a great opportunity for them to make use of those opportunities as well. Again, we want to continue to improve our user experience when buying, applying, or interacting with the licensing system. We talked about this last spring and probably the fall before that. We made some changes with the general game and habitat license. We wanted to make that process, streamline that process by, adding the licenses that are necessary for an individual to be licensed properly, certificate, or again, kind of tailoring that experience to the individual. And yeah, it's important for us to seek those opportunities to make sure everyone's licensed properly here when online. We get a lot of questions with looking at our license seasons. People are always looking for that convenience at the time of application. Our license season starts currently our license season starts April 1st and ends March 31st. We do have several applications that are available in the early spring. This includes spring turkey, moose, elk, sheep. We do get a lot of questions for people even on the, wanting to apply for deer earlier than what's available now. The licensing process is a little easier with the lottery applications. We're subject to the proclamations. So technically there's not a season at that time and we have to wait for those proclamations to be available or signed. So looking at some of these, considering some of these options here, looking at maybe kicking back, the license season a couple months to February 1st. Most of our hunting seasons are done by February 1. At this time, this would allow those people that are applying for these other lotteries, they'd be able to perhaps purchase their license at that time. So some of our challenges with that would be our late season ice anglers there. So they would need to buy a license in February. So either way, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. But again, just still trying to examine the convenience of when we can get people to buy and apply here. We are looking for all this information. We are looking for feedback. So certainly give us a shout if you have any thoughts on that. Okay, I'll jump over to the vendors here. Currently, we have about 128 licensed vendors around the state. These vendors provide tremendous service for us. They're available when our offices are closed or after hours. They do provide access to the systems, computer or access to the internet. They do have that convenience for the customer, especially when they're purchasing any kind of equipment or gear, bait and tackle. So there's that mutual benefit there for our vendors. They do, as I mentioned earlier here, they do use a system that is provided by the Game and Fish. So it's not the same system that you're used to when purchasing on a computer or phone here. With our licensed vendors, they do have a range of experience. These systems do require the vendors and their employees to have some knowledge of Game and Fish licensure here. So some have significant experience and have been doing this for a long time, and others, maybe some of the larger vendors, they often have new staff or a rotating staff in here that may not be as familiar with these systems. Our vendors do work with our department staff to, if we have to train them on any changes to the licensing system, so they are in communication with us. And the current system that they have right now, it does not offer the same features that we spent the last number of years enhancing into the public-facing or self-service system here. So our goal here is to transition our vendors to use this public or self-service system, and I think this will help us ensure that proper licensure. This platform we have, as many of you are familiar with, it's more intuitive for the vendors and their staff. It has better validation, the data quality, it helped eliminate some mistakes again there. And just very important here, addresses our cybersecurity challenges and access to some of the state systems. We really want to limit our vulnerability out there when folks are accessing these systems and do our best to protect this data. And so to do so, to bring our licensed vendors into this, they'd really have to go through the ringer to access state systems. For them, some perks for our vendors. This is a approved process at checkout. The time it takes to move their customers through the line. We can also expand some of our opportunity for our licensed vendors. Many of our vendors have even though they've had these systems offered by Game and Fish, they've naturally transitioned over to this public-facing or self-service system. They basically provided internet access, and some of them have just basically turned a computer around and had their customers come in there and use that to purchase licenses. And so that's a good thing. It's a good thing for us because the individual that's buying is the best author of this information, and so it can limit some mistakes there. We do have a limited number of vendors currently that sell deer, bow, and paddlefish tags. We do think that this system here would allow us to expand those vendors that can sell these. This would be similar to buying any other licensed tag online. The individual just go in and purchase that license, and then that tag would be sent in the mail. If they needed it more timely, they can visit one of our district offices during normal business hours there. Most of our sales are conducted this way. However, we do have some vendors that distribute tags over the counter. So this would cease and take a little planning for the fewer that use this route to purchase a tag, but we expect to provide some information and inform those folks of some of these changes here. Our licensed buyers would receive this in the mail. These other changes here would eliminate the need for some of our licensed vendors. They have to track sales, track tags and inventory, and they also have to submit payments to the department. So they'll gain some things there, again, improve that process for our licensed vendors. So now I'll jump over a little bit to credit card fees here. Credit cards have been the primary choice of payment for licensed purchases when we watched that transition online early on, and as well as at the vendors. Most are primarily using credit cards to purchase. In 2017, the North Dakota legislature provided the option for licensed vendors to charge a purchaser up to 3% of a license fee. When a person would go into a vendor to buy a license, depending on the credit card, when they run that through their point of sale machines, that vendor is charged anywhere from 1% to 3% of the total transaction. So you can imagine maybe a $30 deer tag might be up to 90 cents, or a $250 non-resident deer bow tag might be up to $7. So the legislator provided that options for licensed vendors to charge that fee, also for the services they're providing at the till. Our Game and Fish credit card transaction fees are currently about $800,000 a biennium. We expect as more transition to the self-service option or that modified vendor sales, we expect this to increase about $200,000 in the near future here. As we are aware, there are state agencies that have already implemented this, but they've explored the capability to pass these fees on to the customer at the time of purchase. Again, they're passing a 1% to 3% fee on the total transaction. We're considering the options how to handle our trending fees right now. Currently, we've offset this with our certificate fee. The certificate fee, if you're not familiar, is the $1 fee for residents and the $2 fee for non-residents. So we've been able to cover our credit card transaction fees as this has transitioned. But any changes to that certificate fee any modifications would take legislative changes there. So again, something that we're considering and trying to examine how to handle those in the future here. And that's my update on the credit card transaction fees. If you have any thoughts on these or after the meeting, please give us a shout at the info@ndgf@nd.gov. And if there aren't any other questions here, I'll turn that over to Director Steinwan here.
Brian, we do actually have a question for you that came in. It pertains to spearfishing on this one. Would you have to register again for spearfishing if the licensing timeframe moves to February 1st? And if you ever thought of having a permanent spearfishing number?
That's a good question. We haven't discussed the permanent spearfishing number. We're using that information for the survey information. So that might be something for us to measure annually. Moving that to a certain time, whether that be early in the year, we can certainly look at that. That would be something that if a licensed buyer came in, if we were to adjust those seasons and came back into February, that would be something we'd really have to think about how to handle that. but that's a good question. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, thanks, Brian, and thanks, everybody that gave presentations. Again, it took a little while, but that really is a Reader's Digest version. It's just some of the stuff we're looking at, some of the issues we're looking at. Yeah, and I would remind everybody on the CWD and the credit card fees, we're looking for feedback. We're looking for input from the public on whether or not or how we should implement some of that stuff at this point in time. And realizing that we know there's a little bit of delay from when we say something to when you're actually hearing it. We aren't getting some of those questions in the chat back very quickly. So at this point in time, we're going to try to answer some of those. So we might have a little kaleidoscope tour here, people coming to the podium between myself and whoever. So Greg, what are some of the questions that have come in?
Terry, one for you. With the Game and Fish doing a great job stocking some of the sloughs around the state, how will the no trespass law affect access to these bodies of waters that are stocked using public money?
Good question. Typically, when we're stocking a lake, we want to make sure that there is public access, whether it be via a section line, a legal means of access to that lake. I know Fisheries Development Crew, which is a crew of 3 people for statewide stuff, do a tremendous job of putting in boat ramps, but I really can't answer that question in its entirety right now because we don't know what that final bill is going to look like. Right now, if it's posted and it's specifically for winter fishing access, technically you aren't supposed to go on that land either. It says no hunting or trespassing, and it's a trespass portion. It's not just hunting, it can be criminal trespass. So again, whoever wrote that, I would strongly advise you to watch the next legislative session and those bills dealing with criminal trespass and hunting trespass.
And with a follow-up to that, Terry, you might not be able to answer that at this point either. With these waters that are stocked using public funds, still have access even if there is no public landing?
Even if there's no public landing?
Will these waters that are stocked using public funds still have access even if there's no public landing?
I can't answer that right now. Yeah, we're going to try our darndest to make sure that there is public access, because why would we use sportsmen and women's dollars to stock a lake when the sportsmen and women can't utilize it? So we're always going to try to find some access there for them. It may not be absolutely perfect, but we're going to do the best we can, as always.
One more for you, Terry. Will the department pursue, along with Williams County, public walk-in access and a boat launching ramp in the vicinity of the Hoffland Bay area on Lake Sakakawea?
Great question. And actually, we've had this a few times in the last couple of months here, recognizing that there does need to be more boating access in that area for public safety. It's a little ways between boat ramps up there, but I know Hoffland Bay, Little Egypt, that general area, we've been asked to put a boat ramp in. What we have to look at is the depth and the contour, meaning what's the slope putting the ramp in. Even though you might go into Hoffland Bay and say, geez, I can boat in there, it doesn't mean that you can put a boat in. You might have to back up 300 feet to actually get your tire, or not your tires, but your boat wet on that area. And I know our development crew, our staff up in Williston have looked at those particular issues, and there really is nothing in Hoffland Bay. I know there's a creek coming in there, but looking at the contour lines, there really isn't anything there. If you have any ideas where there's good slope, like an 8% or a 10% slope at a minimum, and you don't have to back in a football field long before you get your boat wet, we're certainly willing to take a look at it. And I guess in association with that, there is a ramp at the confluence that is in very, very poor shape right now. And again, our fisheries development crew is looking at what we can do on that one. It's going to be an expensive fix. We don't know exactly what yet, but I think the estimate is what, Greg, probably $300,000 at this point in time. We don't know for sure, but it's going to be an expensive fix. But those are the kind of things we're looking at. But again, to the people in that, Tioga, Williston area, Ray area, if you have any ideas, we're certainly willing to listen to them, because we do recognize you do need more boating access sites up there. Unfortunately, the topography and the contours and the depths just don't lend itself to good spots up there. So.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I think we got a couple in for Scott Peterson. Scott, if you're ready.
I think we're good. Go ahead.
Okay, we were talking earlier about administrative rule changes, and this question was, what email address do these administrative rule change emails come from?
Oh, okay, good question. So first of all, those emails and text alerts are going to be issued for folks who have signed up to receive our email and text alerts. And so currently that subscription list is about, I'm told, about 13,000. And so in order for you to receive those, if you haven't already signed up, go to our website and sign up sign up for those. But if you're looking for those emails, they'll come from the North Dakota Game and Fish Department, obviously, but at ndgf at info.nd.gov. And so that's what that email will look like when you receive those alerts.
And did you have any other emails that came in?
Was there a question that came in earlier about crossbows, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. So again, this is a question that comes up from time to time, and I think the question was whether or not we would consider allowing the issuance of a crossbow permit to certain people have reached the age of, I believe it was 70, but it doesn't make any difference really the age. But so the question comes up from time to time, and to give you a quick history, crossbows are not a legal weapon for our regular archery season. And so unless, the provision that allows the department to issue special crossbow permits is contained within state law. And in order for an individual to be considered for that, you have to meet one of three criteria. You either have to be blind, paraplegic, or have lost the use of one or both arms. And so for an individual to be considered for one of those permits, they have to go to their doctor. They have to, first of all, receive a crossbow permit application from the department. You can access those on our website, and go see your doctor. And if your doctor, upon that office visit, feels that you have a legitimate medical condition and you meet one of those three stated criteria, that medical personnel can sign off on that, send it to the department, and then at least we can consider that for that individual. But and the people who are authorized to sign those now are licensed physicians, certified nurse practitioners, certified physician's assistants, and licensed chiropractor. And so I guess the short answer is, for the department, in order for the department to consider issuing those crossbow permits to any group of individual other than the three that, the criteria that we already stated, that's going to take legislative action, because the department simply doesn't have the authority to do that by policy or proclamation. So.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Jeb, we have some more questions for Jeb Williams, our Chief of Wildlife. Jeb, the first question for you is, how close can deer stands be together?
There's no restriction or no limit on the close proximity to deer stands or deer blinds, those types of things.
Next pertains to pheasants. Have you ever considered extending the pheasant season further into the new year?
This got a lot of discussion a number of years ago when the department actually did extend it into the first weekend in January. It closes on the first Sunday in January now, and that it actually got a fair amount of discussion at that point in time. One of the issues that always comes up with that is I think the concern from landowners, possibly with our winter situation, knowing that the pheasants usually are going to come closer into the farmyards, feedlots, shelter belts around the farmyards, those types of things. And so we had a lot of feedback from folks that, it just doesn't present a good opportunity as far as hunting goes. And quite honestly, we hear from a lot of landowners that, after 4.5 months of hunting season, that they're kind of done with it too. And so the landowner tolerance issue comes into play. And honestly, in North Dakota, from a pheasant health situation, I think there is something to be said about, having a little bit of worry associated with flushing hen pheasants, and in the middle of January, that type of thing, and to where that could potentially impact, their overall body health, which, could lead to less pheasant production in the future. So, I know this has created quite a bit of discussion because of what South Dakota did, but I also will say that our winter climate versus what South Dakota's is also quite a bit different as well.
Jeb, one question that we have here, there's a couple that came in on the same issue, and it's talking about bow hunters in western North Dakota. Is the department doing anything to monitor the large influx of bow hunters to western North Dakota targeting mule deer? The amount of hunters over the last 3 years has visibly risen to a point that makes a person wonder if we are overhunting the species in those western deer units.
So another topic that we've been hearing more about as far as the kind of the Badlands crowding issue, and the department, it is something that we're paying attention to. We discussed that actually a little bit last spring advisory board meeting, and that is something where we are going to be looking at and discussing some of those things as we go ahead with our 5-year deer goals, because I think it fits right into there quite well. We know that we have a tremendous mule deer resource in the Badlands, and we have an area that people love, dearly love out there as far as spending time and going, and but we also want to make sure we're being responsible with that. As far as the safety net that's in place, I don't necessarily get worried that right now we're overutilizing that. The challenge is we have the rifle license that we can always use as the correction factor, and but the problem with that is that we already have a long waiting period for people to draw a rifle mule deer license in the western units, and so we don't have a lot of people that are interested in waiting a lot longer either. And so, is that archery harvest affecting that a little bit? Those types of things. That fairness issue that we talked about 5 years ago when we talked about the one deer license, that all comes into play. But yeah, there's no doubt there's some increased use in the Badlands that we're hearing about from quite a few people.
And that particular question spawned a couple to ask about forcing archers to pick between mule deer and whitetail bow tags. Any comment on that?
Well, not necessarily specific to that right now. I think the issue is going to get more discussion, though, is the mule deer issue in the Badlands, as far as that potentially being some type of a special draw, things like that, to control that pressure out there. That's what we're hearing from the public, and that is something that is going to be on the discussion block as we move forward.
One last question for you, Jeb. Pertains to mountain lions. Will you be reducing the early season mountain lion quota?
I don't believe so. I think that's something over the last couple of years. Steph Tucker, our wildlife section leader for the game management section, and also the fur bear biologist, feels pretty comfortable with where we've landed. We know that, so the early season, like say for example, this year we had a limit of 8. We only harvested 2. And then now the late season will open up, which includes the use of hounds, and that's at the limit is at season limit at 7. And so once that is filled, then there's a conditional season which opens up the early season back up after that. And so there will be 6 mountain lions there will be available at that point in time when the season closes. So I think right now, to answer that question, I think the department feels pretty comfortable with where we're at with mountain lions.
I spoke too soon. There's one more coming in for you.
Okay.
Any update on the southern bighorn herd call hunt?
At this point in time, no, there isn't a good update, simply because when we looked at release sites, we looked at it obviously really intensely, wanting to be responsible as far as bringing healthy bighorn sheep into the southern Badlands. We need to make sure that there isn't any risk factors, and unfortunately some risk factors are associated with domestic sheep, where bighorn sheep can get in with the domestics and then bring some different viruses and bacteria back to the bighorn herd. So at this point in time, our release sites, we did not feel comfortable enough to move ahead with that planned process, but it is something that we're going to be keeping on our bighorn sheep discussions, but at this point in time, we are not moving forward with that.
Okay, thank you, Jeb.
Thank you.
We have a few that came in for our fisheries chief, Greg Power again. Greg, if you're ready to address a couple questions. The first one is, how did the new fish fillet transport rule go this year?
It's funny that, so maybe a little bit of background. That one went in place April 1st of this year, so we're what, 8-9 months behind us now. This new rule was discussed last spring at the spring advisory board meeting. It's a little bit funny because we were talking just in the office here a month ago or so how we heard absolutely nothing from public, good, bad, or otherwise on this particular issue. We assumed it must have gone over fine, so a little bit of follow-up with law enforcement, our game wardens out there, and for those that had any dealings with the issue, probably in particular a fish cleaning station, the change, which is very minor to start with, was not a big deal with the public. There's some that did not know of the change, of course, the first year of a new rule, but they understood the logic behind it, and so all things considered is pretty much a non-issue, I guess.
Greg, couple on cormorants. What is the latest on management and harvest?
Cormorants, yeah. So doesn't matter where the listeners or viewers are from, probably Crosby or Wahpeton. It's a common theme. Every advisory board, or at least probably once a year at an advisory board meeting, the cormorant issue comes up. It's nothing new, but maybe a little bit of background. Cormorants are a migratory bird that can eat a pound to pound and a half of fish every day. And there's tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of cormorants in North Dakota during the open water season. So you put a pencil to it, it's a lot of pounds or tons of desirable fish that are consumed. In particular, Western North Dakota, it's oftentimes in trout impoundments. Our reservoirs in Western North Dakota, they could do a number on them, and then also perch. And especially the new perch lakes in the central part and southeast part of North Dakota. So management, there has really not been a lot of management with cormorants. It's part of the problem. They're pretty not unregulated. They're very well regulated. There's no take of them. The department of the state agencies have had the ability to get what called depredation permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who manage cormorants because they're migratory birds. And over the years, the issue oftentimes are localized issues where they really can cause a lot of problems. So we focus on those. Our biologists and/or our game wardens will haze them or actually shoot a few. We have been permitted to do that, but the numbers have dwindled that we've been able to take. Maybe the new news, perhaps good news, is that the Fish and Wildlife Service is reassessing the issue. It's going through a very long process, and maybe by this next summer, we're going to have a few more tools in the toolbox to deal with cormorants. It will not be open up to public hunting or something like that, but at least the state agencies might be able to do a little bit more than we've been able to do in the past. So,
Greg, and the final question for you is, when will the netting results be posted on the Game and Fish website?
I actually should have brought that up earlier. That's a very good question. Just a few years back, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago, we started in the month of December, started to provide our catch record data. Basically, it's a reduced version of our catch record data, so people didn't have to do data mining and such. So we provide length frequencies of the game fish by water body based on our test netting results. Some of the basic data, and people like that information. They really, once it's posted out there, they excuse me, some of these lakes become their go-to lake. Always prospecting for a new hot fishing lake. So that information, we're in the process of finishing our quality control or quality assurance of the data, but every year we're shooting for the holidays to have it available. It could be as early as middle of December. So in the next few weeks, look forward to that and do what you want with it, but it's good information.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Next, we have up our new Chief Game Warden, Scott Winkleman. And Scott, I gave you a couple questions here while you were here in the audience. And if you want to address those questions and then answer those, and then we'll close out the session tonight.
No problem. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Scott Winkleman. I'm the Chief of the Enforcement Division. The first question I will address is regarding the law retrieving game that is shot legally and then dies on posted land. The question is, do you have to drag the deer off the posted land, or can you legally drive to the deer and load it up with your vehicle? The law that allows a person to go on to legally posted land to retrieve game does state that it is clear that it allows for a person to enter that land and not necessarily a vehicle. So the landowner can restrict vehicle access. Certainly, we would encourage visiting with the landowner, talking with them. There's a lot of them that once they visited with you would not mind, but the law does allow for a person and not a vehicle to access that land. The second question deals with posting land and the requirements for it, and are there different laws from one end of the state to the other? The simple answer is no. The law is the same from one end of the state to the other. The land to be legally posted must have a sign every 880 yards, or if it is enclosed by a fence, there can be a sign at all of the gates surrounding it. And each sign must have a legible name of the person posting the land on it. Where there can be a little bit of a difference between counties is the law also says that if the land is not posted exactly in that manner, a person can still be found guilty as long as it was substantially posted and clear that the hunting was prohibited. Different counties, different states attorneys, different judges interpret that a little bit different sometimes. What is substantial in one county may not be in another. But the law is the same from one end of the state to the other. Next question. I see a problem with gratis tags from out-of-state landowners letting kids, wives, brothers, sisters, uncles, grandparents use this tag when they come to North Dakota. The problem needs to be fixed. That's certainly illegal. That's an enforcement issue, and if anybody knows of that happening, certainly please give us a call and we will look into it. Second part of that question regards the cost of non-resident licenses for big game, and they possibly should be increased. That is strictly a legislative issue. They control the license fees. And last question I have regarding gratis tags again. Can you hunt on a relative's land? Yes, in limited instances. A person, their spouse, and their children may hunt together on land that is on any of the persons, on any of those people's application. So it is specific to the person, that person's spouse, and their children. And they do have to hunt together while they are out there. That's the second part of the question. Are the rules the same for all species of gratis tags? No, that hunting together on each other's land only pertains to gratis deer licenses. It does not pertain to any other gratis licenses. I believe that is all I had for this evening, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Got another question that came in for our Deputy Director on administrative rule changes.
And as I understand it, the question was phrased this way. They said that they received the notification of the proposed rule changes, but they were asking which of those proposed rule changes were approved, and the short answer is they all were. So there were, and I want to say in the lower 20s, but basically if you already received the list of the proposed changes, just know that they all went into effect October 1st.
Thank you, Scott. Jeb, there's another question that came in for you. In terms of CWD tagging requirements, what about doing things like Wyoming does where the tag doesn't have to be attached, but accompanies the carcass and have proof of sex attached to the meat?
Yeah, so there are a number of states that do the proof of sex attachment, and that is an option. Like Terry said earlier, I guess we're looking for opinions on ways that we can allow some flexibility with the transportation of your harvested deer, and that is an option. I guess personally, from my standpoint, I mean, I think that I think it'd be a little cleaner and a little better if we didn't allow that. I think ultimately where the department would like to go on this is that in the future, if we do get an actual app where an individual can take those pictures into an app, and then those get downloaded to the department, so then there's some accountability associated with that, and to where the department has that leeway with those individuals that chose to go that route. So I mean, that's been kind of some of our conversations with that issue, and again, this isn't final. This is just a proposal, and so we're open to some different options out there. But we have had several different discussions on the issue, and aware that there are some Western states that do the proof of sex as well. Okay, thanks, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Jeb.
Thank you, Jeb, and everybody answering questions. As you can tell, we get a wide variety of questions, sometimes pretty emotional. We know we did have some with the chats that came in late. We tried to address all of those. We did learn a lot from last spring that we're going to close this down, and hopefully we've addressed all your questions, maybe not the way you really wanted them answered, but hopefully we did address them. And like I said at the beginning, we will get back to you, especially the ones that emailed in. We will get back to you eventually. Some of these we will answer tomorrow night because they're kind of statewide. Some of them are more of an eastern flavor, eastern part of North Dakota flavor, so we're going to answer those tomorrow night. So we would certainly encourage everybody to participate again tomorrow night. And if we didn't get to your questions, I really, really apologize. We did find out that after about an hour and a half to 2 hours last year, the participation or the viewership just dropped off dramatically. And I guess I haven't checked what it's doing tonight, but we're going to shut it down. We have about 7 minutes left here, but I think we've answered all the questions that we can answer in a brief period. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Certainly continue to send us comments. Don't be redundant. When we get one, we take that as much as we do if we get 100 of the same comments. So thank you for all that, and maybe see you tomorrow night. So thank you, everyone.